the way we treat strangers tells the truth about us more than any words ever will. What happens when a routine moment turns into a national reckoning? Let us know in the comments section below. Charlotte Goldstein tapped her pen sharply against the counter, her lips pressed into a straight line. "Group A passengers should already be boarded," she said without looking up. Her voice was curt, measured like a piano note struck with precision. The airline supervisor's badge on her crisp blouse read Customer Experience Manager, but no one had experienced her warmth in years. "Name?" she asked flatly, lifting her gaze for the first time. "Clarence Jameson, but folks call me CJ." He handed over his boarding pass with both hands, his eyes soft and tired. The lines on his face were deep but gentle, like folded fabric after a lifetime of wear. His outfit was plain, a pressed white shirt tucked into khaki slacks, polished brown shoes, and a dark green cap embroidered with faded yellow letters. Special Forces, Vietnam. Charlotte barely glanced at the pass. "Sir, this is first class. Are you sure this is yours?" CJ smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am. Gate agent handed it to me herself." "Aha." She looked again, this time more carefully. He was right. First class, seat 3A. Charlotte's jaw shifted slightly. It wasn't that she meant to doubt him. It just didn't make sense to her. A man like him, alone, elderly, wearing a jacket that had seen better decades, didn't look first class, at least not in her mind. "We've had some mix-ups today," she said, already waving over a younger attendant. "Can you double-check seat 3A? The attendant glanced between the two of them, hesitant. "That's what it says on the system." Charlotte shook her head. "Then pull someone. We've got an upgrade waiting, and this has to be the error. I'll reassign him to 19C. "No need for a fuss," CJ said gently. "I can sit wherever you need me." But a few feet away, someone had already begun recording on their phone. A college student, maybe 19, nudged his friend. "You seeing this?" Charlotte didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but didn't care. Rules were rules, and perception, at least to her, was half the job. The young attendant led CJ down the aisle, his back straight, shoulders squared like he was still in uniform. There was no protest, no argument, just quiet compliance. And that's what made it worse. Charlotte returned to the gate desk, resetting her face with a firm nod. Efficiency above all. A family approached, the kind she was used to greeting with a practiced smile. Polo shirts, tote bags, blonde children eating pretzels too close to boarding time. But from across the terminal, whispers started spreading like ink on water. A man in a wheelchair tapped his nurse. Isn't that Clarence Jameson?" he whispered. The nurse blinked. "Who?" "The man who dragged 3 of his brothers through a rice field under sniper fire. He's in that article I read last year, The Forgotten Heroes of Doc 2. That's him." As passengers boarded, CJ sat silently in 19C economy, middle seat. His hat rested on his lap now, no bitterness in his eyes, just patience. The kind that comes after 1,000 small humiliations no one ever apologizes for. Across the aisle, a woman in a business suit leaned over. "Are you who I think you are?" He chuckled. "Depends on who you think I am. Did you serve in Vietnam?" He nodded. "A long time ago." She blinked, like something was sinking in. Then she stood. "This ain't right." The phone that had been recording earlier was now uploading the clip to social media. No caption, just raw footage. The slow, quiet moment of a man being bumped from the seat he paid for with dignity unshaken, and a supervisor who hadn't cared to ask why he was flying first class in the first place. Back in the cockpit, Captain Andrew Foster zipped up his flight jacket, preparing for the announcement. He had no idea yet what was unfolding just outside the door, but fate had a habit of catching up with people at 35,000 feet. In the cabin, the woman from earlier turned to her seatmate. "You know what kills me? That man's probably done more for this country than the whole damn plane put together." Charlotte walked down the aisle to do a final check. Eyes followed her now. Passengers who'd seen the interaction were whispering, staring, shifting uncomfortably. He passed 19Cs. She didn't meet his eyes. But CJ smiled anyway. And that's when a girl, maybe 10 years old, asked her mother, too loudly, "Mommy, why did the lady make the hero sit back here?" Charlotte stopped walking. For the first time, something flickered, a wrinkle in her calm. She turned and looked behind her, and caught CJ watching her. Not angry, not smug, just tired. She walked faster, but the story wouldn't stay seated. It had already taken flight. The air inside the plane shifted the moment the main cabin doors shut. It wasn't the pressurization. It was something else. An uneasiness that drifted through the rows like a low fog. Eyes were darting, glances exchanged without a word spoken, and at the center of it all was Charlotte, walking the aisle with a clipboard that no longer felt like authority in her hands but a shield. She passed CJ's row again, this time without looking at him, but she could feel him. It wasn't guilt, not yet. It was the weight of being watched, judged. Her spine stiffened against it. Near the galley, Michelle Delgado, the flight attendant on duty in first class, was flipping through the manifest. Her eyes were narrowed, her lips pursed. She'd seen Charlotte's little reassignment earlier and hadn't said anything, at least not yet. Michelle was Latina, mid-30s, sharp as glass, and didn't care for subtle racism dressed up as policy enforcement. She'd seen enough of it in her years on the job. Passengers of color double-checked, questioned, redirected to economy by mistake. But today was different. Today, the person bumped wasn't just a man of color. He was someone with a story that mattered. She just didn't know the whole of it yet. As Charlotte entered the galley to finalize her log entries, Michelle turned to her with a tight smile. "The gentleman you reassigned, 3A? Charlotte barely glanced up. "Yeah, he had a valid seat in first class." "I know," Charlotte replied, too fast. "It was a discretionary call. Someone else was prior." Michelle didn't blink. "You mean someone else looked like they belonged more?" Charlotte's jaw clenched. "Don't start with me." "I'm just saying," Michelle continued, her voice even. "We all noticed. Passengers are talking." "Passengers talk about everything," Charlotte snapped. "We follow procedures." Michelle tilted her head. "You followed a procedure, all right." Charlotte turned away and walked briskly back into the aisle, eager to resume control, but something about Michelle's words lingered. They clung to her like static. She hated confrontation, but more than that, she hated being accused of something she wasn't ready to admit about herself. In row 7, a teenage boy named Theo was hunched over his phone. The video he'd recorded was already at 27,000 views. No caption, just a 17-second clip showing CJ being bumped. No yelling, no arguments, just Charlotte's cold voice and CJ's quiet nod. The internet didn't need drama. It needed contrast, dignity beside dismissal. And this had both. Next to Theo, his aunt, a school principal from Cleveland, was watching the video again with a grim expression. "This man's important," she said. "I think I've seen him before. A write-up. PBS, maybe?" She pulled out her tablet, fingers tapping fast. "Clarence Jameson," she murmured aloud. "Clarence J. Jameson. Vietnam. Green Beret. Purple Heart. Saved. Oh my God. Saved 19 soldiers in one night." Theo looked up, eyebrows rising. "Wait, 19? Shot twice and still dragged them out one by one," his aunt whispered, showing him the article. Meanwhile, up in row 2A, Captain Foster stepped out from the cockpit. He often took a short pre-flight walk down the first-class aisle, giving polite nods to the elite passengers. But something caught his eye. Or rather, something didn't. Seat 3A was empty. He turned to Michelle, who was already standing in the galley, watching him. "Where's the older gentleman, the vet?" "He was bumped," she said, loud enough for Charlotte, still within earshot, to hear. "Bumped?" Foster repeated, blinking. Michelle didn't break eye contact. "By the supervisor." He didn't say anything immediately, but he turned, walked down the aisle, and looked into the rows until he saw it. CJ, middle seat, sandwiched between a young mother with a crying infant and a tech consultant trying to finish a spreadsheet on a laptop half the size of the tray table. And still the man sat there without a hint of anger. Captain Foster approached slowly, standing just beside the row. "Sir," he said. CJ looked up, surprised. "Yes, Captain? I just wanted to personally thank you for your service. I recognized your name." CJ smiled. "Didn't think anyone would these days." "Trust me," the captain said, voice low. "Some of us never forget." CJ offered a simple nod. "Much appreciated." The captain glanced at the mother and the tech guy, then back at CJ. "I'm going to have someone from the crew speak with you shortly. You deserve better." But CJ shook his head. "Captain, I've learned not to make noise. It's all right. Let's just get where we're going." Foster nodded, but something in his face had changed, like something had clicked into place. Back at the gallery, Michelle was staring at her watch. 10 minutes until takeoff. She looked up as Foster returned. "I want to make an announcement once we're in the air," he said. Michelle raised an eyebrow. "An announcement?" "A personal one." She nodded slowly, understanding. "Let me know when." In 19C, CJ folded his arms and leaned his head back, eyes closing gently. Around him, the energy in the cabin was electric, buzzing, watching, waiting. Charlotte passed him again, now slower, no longer confident. For the first time, her footsteps felt unsure. She looked at him just for a second. He looked back. Not angry, not bitter, but somehow taller. She looked away and walked on. CJ didn't sleep. He didn't need to. You don't spend 3 tours in a jungle counting minutes between explosions just to be undone by an airplane seat and a cramped tray table. No, what kept his eyes open now wasn't discomfort. It was the tension in the air. The kind that crept in when silence got too loud and respect became too late. 24 rows ahead, Charlotte sat stiffly in the jump seat near the front galley, flipping through her logbook but barely seeing the ink. Something had changed. She couldn't name it, but she could feel it, like walking into a room and realizing you're the only one who missed the punchline. She'd made the call. She'd moved the man. He hadn't protested, not once. But that didn't seem to matter anymore. 2 rows behind her, Michelle was fielding passenger requests for ginger ale and headphones with her usual grace. But every so often her eyes flicked toward the cockpit door, waiting. Captain Foster had said he wanted to make a statement once they hit cruising altitude. That moment was near. The fasten seatbelt light blinked off with a soft ding. Michelle nodded once, as if receiving her cue. The captain stepped out of the cockpit. His uniform was crisp, voice calm as he lifted the handset. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet and expect a smooth flight ahead." He paused for a moment. Passengers expected weather updates, time zones, connections. But then his tone shifted. "Before I turn things back over to the cabin crew," he said, "I'd like to recognize someone very special flying with us today." Charlotte turned, barely. Her eyes tracked the captain as he stood there, holding the mic like a man at a podium. "There is a gentleman seated in 19C, Foster continued. "You might have walked past him. You might not have known his name, but you should have." Passengers began to murmur, heads turning. "His name is Clarence Jameson," the captain said. "He's a retired member of the United States Army Special Forces, and on June 14, 1969, during a mission in the Central Highlands of Vietnam, Sergeant Jameson carried 19 of his fellow soldiers, many of them wounded, across open fire and through enemy lines. He was shot twice. He didn't stop." Stunned silence fell over the plane. CJ sat still in his seat, hat now clutched in both hands, eyes locked on the floor. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply breathed. Foster continued. "He never told anyone, never expected applause. He didn't even ask for the seat he earned. And that's exactly why he deserves it." Michelle stepped forward, unbuckling from the wall. She didn't need to be told what to do. She walked to row 19, standing just in front of CJ. "Mr. Jameson," she said gently, "on behalf of this crew and this airline, we'd be honored if you'd accept our invitation to return to the seat you were originally assigned." Passengers began clapping, not politely, not the way people clap when a plane lands. This was different. Hands hit together like thunder, row by row. CJ looked around, confused. "I'm fine right here," he said, shaking his head slowly. "You shouldn't have to be," Michelle said, her voice quiet but resolute. A man in row 20 stood up and stepped into the aisle. "Sir, I'll help you with your bag." CJ didn't argue. Not this time. Something in the captain's words had pulled a memory loose, a moment when he had to carry a friend through the smoke, through the jungle, praying his legs didn't give out before the next bullet did. He stood, and the plane stood with him. The applause swelled, passengers rising one by one. Even the toddler who had been shrieking for the past hour had gone quiet. Something about the moment demanded reverence. Charlotte stood too, but not by choice. She felt her legs move, like instinct. Her heart hammered as CJ walked past her. He didn't meet her eyes. She wished he had. As CJ reached the first-class section, Michelle opened the curtain like a stage reveal. The man who'd once been bumped now walked like someone being honored at a funeral and a parade all at once. Captain Foster extended his hand. CJ shook it. "This time," the captain said, just loud enough for him to hear, "we do it right." CJ nodded once and took his seat. 3A. A moment later, Michelle placed his green cap gently on the center of the tray table, like a crown. It was then that Charlotte noticed passengers were recording again. Not out of malice, not for scandal, but to remember, to share, to say, "This happened and I saw it." Back in the galley, Charlotte leaned against the wall. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerful behind her badge. She felt small. Not humiliated, but humbled. She thought about the 10-year-old girl's voice again. "Mommy, why did the lady make the hero sit back here?" That child had seen through everything Charlotte didn't want to admit. Michelle returned to the galley. She didn't speak, just handed Charlotte the leftover first-class menu, something she'd held onto out of habit. Charlotte took it wordlessly. The clapping had faded. The cabin settled. But the change was permanent. 35,000 feet in the air, a mistake had been seen. And for once, it had been made right. They began their descent an hour later. The sky outside the oval windows softened into a watercolor wash of clouds and late afternoon haze, as if even the sun had taken a moment to reconsider how it shined today. CJ sat peacefully in 3A, arms folded lightly over his chest, his green Special Forces cap resting again in his lap like an old companion. Passengers still stole glances at him, not out of curiosity now, but respect. Some whispered his name like they were passing along a secret. Others just smiled softly, a shared understanding in their eyes. The energy on the plane had changed completely. Dignity had found a place in the cabin, and it traveled quietly from row to row. Charlotte remained seated near the front, her posture more relaxed than before, but her thoughts churned. The tablet on her lap was blank. She hadn't logged anything since the captain's announcement. There was no protocol for something like this, no drop-down option for public moral awakening. Michelle approached CJ once more with a warm smile. "Can I get you anything before we land, Mr. Jameson? Water? Coffee?" CJ chuckled lightly. "You've already given me more than I ever got in a long time. I'm good, ma'am." "Then I'll sit tight, too." Michelle walked back toward the galley but paused when she passed Charlotte. "You good?" she asked, quiet but not unkind. Charlotte nodded, eyes still forward. "I don't know what I am. Embarrassed? Grateful? Probably both." Michelle folded her arms and leaned slightly against the galley wall. "People get it wrong sometimes. Doesn't mean they're bad. Just means they've got more learning left to do." Charlotte finally turned her head. "I didn't see him. Not really. I saw what I expected." "That's what most people do," Michelle replied. "It's what you do after that makes the difference." Charlotte looked down at her lap. The flight report would be filed, the hours counted, the schedule reset. But this wasn't going in a report. This was going in her memory. Captain Foster's voice came back over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for arrival." Michelle smiled at Charlotte once more before stepping into her routine, checking seatbelts and tray tables, moving through the aisles with a grace that made every passenger feel safe, even if they didn't realize it. When the wheels finally kissed the runway, a hush fell over the cabin, not because the landing was rough or smooth, but because they all knew the moment was about to end. The quiet camaraderie, the unspoken unity that had taken hold mid-air, would dissolve soon into baggage claims, phone calls, and rushing to ride shares. As the plane rolled to a stop and the seatbelt signs blinked off, people stood. But not like usual, not with frantic elbowing or impatient sighs. They waited, turned, stepped aside. CJ stood slowly, carefully. The young mother from 19A held her child close and smiled up at him. The teen who had posted the video nodded with wide, awed eyes. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of his row and reached out a hand. "Thank you, sir, for everything." CJ shook it, firm and warm. "Thank you for saying that." And then it happened. Passengers began clapping again. Not all at once, not loudly, just gently. A wave of appreciation, soft but steady, rising like a tide through the cabin. He nodded to each as he walked, his old brown shoes moving with purpose down the aisle. For a moment the plane became a hallway of honor, and the gate was the finish line of a life that had rarely been celebrated outside the memories of those he had saved. As he reached the exit, Charlotte stood waiting beside the captain. She didn't have a script this time. She didn't know how to fix the past, but she wanted to start with the present. "Mr. Jameson," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "I want to apologize. I made an assumption that never should have been made." CJ looked at her, calm and unreadable. "I appreciate that," he said. "Takes something to say it out loud." "I'll do better," Charlotte added, eyes slightly wet but firm. CJ nodded. "Then you already have." He offered his hand. She took it. Outside the gate, the terminal buzzed with its usual chaos. But just beyond the security checkpoint stood a small crowd holding signs and banners, some printed, some hand-drawn. "Welcome home, CJ, American hero. Thank you for your service." His granddaughter stood among them, holding a bouquet of fresh yellow roses. She wore a denim jacket and sneakers, and her eyes glowed when she saw him. "Grandpa," CJ's face lit up like sunrise. He walked toward her, slow but certain, every step shedding the years of quiet that had wrapped around him like dust. He reached her and wrapped her in a hug so full, so real, that several bystanders began tearing up without knowing why. Michelle watched from inside the jet bridge, one hand pressed to her chest. Charlotte stood beside her, silent. "I think that video went viral," Michelle said. Charlotte nodded. "Good." They turned back to the plane. Passengers were disembarking, life continuing as it always does. But somewhere out there, the internet was lighting up. The story was being shared, and Clarence Jameson, the man who never asked for attention, was finally being seen. The airline issued a public statement 2 days later. The CEO met with CJ personally, handed him a plaque, and offered a donation in his name to a veterans' housing charity. But the bigger moment came 2 months later. Under the arcing rotunda of the National Mall, CJ stood at the podium in full dress uniform. Cameras flashed, senators clapped, school children waved little flags. He received the Medal of Honor, 46 years overdue. And in the front row sat Charlotte Goldstein, no longer holding a clipboard, no longer hiding behind rules, just watching, standing, proud. Behind her, Captain Foster gave a single, sharp salute. CJ looked across the crowd and smiled. At last, it had been done right, and everyone was watching.